shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. And then shall he send his angels, and shall gather together his chosen from the four winds, from the uttermost part of earth to the uttermost part of heaven. Now learn of
Good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. Continuing in 1 Corinthians, we're in chapter 15, verse 44, where it says, "It is sown a natural body is raised a spiritual body. There is a natural body and there is a spiritual body." Paul had been using this analogy of, sowing the body in the earth like a seed is sown. He doesn't go very deeply into it, but it just mentions it in passing. And just the fact that while, the seed and the plant that come forth are intimately connected to each other and are of, we know now that they have precisely the same DNA. You know what I mean? So there's something about the characteristics of the original body and the resulting body, the resurrection body, the carnal body versus the spiritual body. There's something about them that is absolutely tied together. One proceeds from the other, and they are of a similar character. I say character as opposed to nature. They have a completely different nature, but similar character. And by that I mean, it does not yet appear what we shall be. I don't know exactly, but we know that the Lord looked as he did on earth. They were able to recognize him after the resurrection, and also not just after the resurrection when they could put their hands in his wounds, because that's with what body do they come? You wonder. I don't want to be necessarily carrying all my wounds around forever. You know what I mean? If someone was beheaded and they were raised from the dead, they don't want to be like, here, see, look at, take off my head. So, I don't think that it's that he had to have his wounds, but it's that he could show his wounds. And that in that his body rose, he did not see corruption. It is a special case, but our bodies will see corruption. And so when we raise them, the flesh will be transformed into the spiritual. It is about, when we say spiritual, by the way, there's a natural body and there's a spiritual body. Now that seems like a weird term, and I agree. Bodies terrestrial, bodies heavenly. Okay? Bodies terrestrial, bodies natural, according to the nature of this world, the natural body as you know it, and bodies spiritual. When we think of things as spiritual things, we think, well, they're not carnal things, not of the flesh. They're things of the thought. They're more, things of the spirit are more ethereal. When the apostles greeted Jesus, they thought he was a spirit. They were afraid he was a spirit, actually. He says, "See, it is me. Touch me, handle me. A spirit has not flesh and bones, as you see I have." So, a spirit is generally considered something that does not have a body, right? Not in the terms we think of. But he's not saying it is a spirit, but a spiritual body. And I don't wonder if that term isn't used for somewhat convenience. And why is it a spiritual body? Because it is quickened by the Spirit of God, made alive again by God's Spirit. And alive in the sense that heavenly beings are alive. This is one thing I never knew. I saw someone draw a dichotomy about the idea of God, that either he was a super dude, like a like an alien whose technology is so far exceeds ours that it seems like magic. And in that case, he is bound by this universe. He is natural like we are. It's just beyond our understanding. And he said, well, that kind of God is certainly possible. And I guess in his mind, that was kind of like the Greek gods or the gods of mythology. A super dude. Then, like because the idea, like through technology, you could terraform, so you could say they create the worlds and all kinds of stuff like that. But then they posited a God who was an intelligence without a body. That was a merely ethereal thing. And I think, and the person who was talking about God with this unbeliever, I don't even think they were a Christian, the person who was taking the God position. They weren't really able to bridge that sort of that he has no substance. God has substance. Moreover, spirit has substance, I believe it is fair to say. And that but the problem is we cannot quantify easily, in certainly not in a material sense, spirit. You know what I mean? Like, we cannot put it in a beaker. Spirit is the kind of thing you could have subjective individuals report on. You know what I mean? Like some person could quantify a spiritual experience. Like how much spirit they experience of some whatever spirit. I'm just using the word spirit now generally in terms of high spirits, low spirits. What I'm saying is it's certainly something real. I think God's substance goes beyond that which a spirit entails. But certainly God has substance. And when Paul talks about these spiritual bodies, they are substantive bodies. Now, I use substance the same way the Trinitarians use it when they talk about God. I don't mean particles. I don't mean material particles as we know them. I mean interdimensional God substance. Or something of that, something of some nature which I have not. It's just like, the scientists theorize about all kinds of strange particles. Now, they theorize about strange particles because they know particles exist, so they say, well, let's think of some new strange ones. But the idea of something, another kind of substance that is not a particle, or of a kind of a particle such as we have never seen, meaning not related at all to any particles known to man. People generally get upset if you posit type of thing like that because they don't like that idea because, well, it's non-observation. We haven't observed anything, so you're just kind of imagining it. But all invention starts with imagination anyways. All discovery starts with imagination. Like, how are you going to discover something unless you imagine you might, if by looking you might find it? Originally atoms were imaginary. And we may not have the power to discover a lot of things. But my point is that the body that is spiritual is not just a body of, we think, the way we perceive spirit as being ethereal and not having substance. It has substance, but it has a substance that we are not familiar with. When Jesus was transformed on the Mount of Transfiguration, his body shone with the light. He was transfigured. That transfiguration means he changed his figure. He changed forms. And the form he changed into, I think it is safe to assume, is the spiritual body. So the body that is raised is a body that is raised in power, as he said in the previous verse. It is sown in weakness. It is raised in power. It is a powerful body that is not subject to the same diseases and weaknesses that this body is. It is a body formed of the substance of heaven. You know what I mean? I don't think it is made of the substance of God per se, like we're made of the same substance as God, because that would be not right. But it's constructed of a spiritual substance, of which we have not become privy to yet. It's not yet appeared. It's not yet known. So Paul's saying there is a natural body and there is a spiritual body. Now some would say, I've heard it said, that the spiritual body just resides right inside you right now. And I don't know about that. It is sown in corruption, it is raised in incorruption. There's sort of a power. It's just like when you put a seed in the ground. Everything's there to raise the new body, but it doesn't get created without some addition. I mean, you can put a seed in the ground, but if the ground is dry, the seed will stay dormant forever. You have to add the water. And it's interesting, of course, in the book of Revelation, everywhere else, the water of life is what is offered to those who enter into God's kingdom, who lay hold on eternal life. There is the river of water of life. And as Jesus promised, he that believeth on me will have a well of water in him springing up into everlasting life. The water is necessary, at least symbolically, for everlasting life. And the water, it comes from God's Spirit. So it's kind of also used the analogy of planting. Everything that's planted must be watered for it to grow. So, the power of God waters us, so to speak, and we are raised in power. We are buried and planted in the earth, in natural body we are raised a spiritual body. And so it is written, the first man, Adam, was made a living soul. It's right out of Genesis. God formed man of the dust of the earth and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Man is made a soul. The definition of a soul is kind of, how do you define a soul? We talk about body, soul, and spirit, right? It's funny because some people think it's a clear, like that's a clear 1, 2, 3 thing. And I guess it is. Sometimes I think there's a bit of a ambiguity between the soul and the spirit. But we generally think of the soul as, well, I do think that the spirit is the life that is in us. A body made of the life of the Spirit of God. The life given from the Spirit of God. A body made of living substance. But the soul is not, and I do think the spirit can be impersonal. I mean, I've talked about how the people can share spirits. They can be of the same spirit, at least in some aspect. I suppose that's true of the body too, right? We can be of the same race or the same eye color, right? We can be of the same this, that, the other. Well, it's certainly true of the spirit. Of the soul, though, people talk about soulmates, but they never talk about people having the same soul. Because I think even all humans understand that the soul is, twins. When you have twins may have identical everything, maybe even identical spirits, but they're going to have unique souls. See, I don't know enough about any of those things. I mean, I've studied the Bible for a long time. And there's a lot of little examples of things with spirits, examples of things with souls. And I don't know. I can't say I've done an exhaustive. I've definitely looked at it in the scriptures, but I haven't done an exhaustive look at other people's analysis of the soul and spirit. But it does seem to me that it's quite clear that the soul represents the individual. The thing, when God breathed the breath of life into Adam, into the dust, the breath of life is the spirit. And when the spirit entered the body, the man became a living soul, an individual. Now, it's interesting, the word in Hebrew, I believe, also. See, it's translated several different ways. The Hebrew nephesh is translated life, soul. It might even be translated breath at times. That's why I say it's confusing. In the Greek, it's suchi and psyche. Sounds very similar, you know what I mean? Because it's like I said, they're both aspects of the human existence that are ethereal relative to the natural body. I mean, we know that people are alive and there's something that animates them, and when they die, we see that it's gone. And that's the spirit. The soul, though, what happens to the soul? Well, according to Acts 2 or 3, Peter said that Jesus' soul was not left in hell. When he was dead for 3 days, his soul was he descended into hell, as they say. That means the grave. His soul was in the ground. Thou wilt not leave my soul in hell. And when I talk about hell, generally when I use that term, I'm referring to Hades or Sheol, which is not referred to the lake of fire or the traditional view of hell, but it just refers to being dead and buried in the ground. And so Jesus, his soul was not left in hell. But when he died, he said, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. So you see, an interesting thing is that the soul was not left in hell. It had danger of being left in there. Unless we were to just take that all as, you could just write it off. Oh, that's just poetic language. It doesn't really mean anything. Though, when you listen to Peter talk about it, it doesn't sound like he's trying to wax poetic. It doesn't sound like he's trying to tell a parable. Sounds like he's trying to tell us the facts about Jesus' resurrection. That's how it sounds to me. Adam was made into a living soul. That's what we are, living souls. Souls that live. Even when he says a living soul, I believe that is 2 words in Greek, in which I want to know for sure. Oh, boy. Okay, so living soul. Where is chapter 15? I just want to know. Okay. Living is a different word. Zao. Because souls can be dead. A dead soul. Because in a sense, I don't really believe in soul sleep. I believe that the souls die. They don't disappear. I mean, like when you see a dead person, you're looking at a dead soul. The spirit's gone. When the spirit leaves, man becomes not a living soul, and if you look at soul in terms of an individual, it's why they call it soul sleep, because and the scriptures are calling death sleep. So if it's soul sleep, I believe, is also a euphemism. But the thing about souls is that, just like bodies, even if they're dead, they don't cease to exist. They cease to be conscious. They cease to be living. Just like a rock does not cease to exist by being a dead rock. It still has existence. It's just not alive. Same thing with soul. The bodies aren't sleeping, and neither are the souls. That's a euphemism, meaning they're dead. They're waiting for the spirit of life from God to return. In the book of Revelation, the 2 witnesses are slain and their bodies lay in the street of the great city, which is called Sodom and Egypt in the Hebrew tongue. Which is also called, not in the Hebrew tongue, which is also called Sodom and Egypt. And it says these words, after 3 days and a half, the spirit of life from God entered into them. Now it says that formulation, the spirit of life from God, just like from Adam. It does not say their spirits returned from heaven, but rather they laid there in the streets, everyone saw their dead bodies, and the Spirit of life from God entered into them, and they stood upon their feet. When the Spirit of life from God enters into your dead body, you become a living soul again. Even if that dead body has been returned to the same dust that Adam was made from. Dust thou art, and to dust thou shalt return. And Paul says here something very interesting. That is not first which was spiritual, but that which is natural. That's an important thing. I reject all teachings that say we pre-incarnate our bodies. Anything that says you exist as a living being outside of your body before you were conceived. Now, you could say, well, wait a second. Well, Jesus pre-existed his body. Yeah, but that's not what he's talking about. Obviously, Jesus precedes all things. Jesus is before Adam. So obviously, Paul doesn't have that in mind when he's saying what is first spiritual and what is... He's talking about the resurrection, our life. When he's saying you don't start off with a spiritual body and then go into a natural body and then go back into a spiritual body. That's what certain teachers like Arnold Murray teach, and that's what some other views. I mean, reincarnation also has that view, that there is a spirit first, a spirit like a personal spirit. Because here's the thing, without a body, and that's what this atheist understood, without some sort of container, we can't just have a disembodied soul is not a living soul. Like the way I sense the world is with this body. I touch things, I see things, I taste things. My brain your brain is like, it's almost like, they say the five senses. I have the sixth sense is the brain. It senses things. It picks up thoughts. You know what I mean? It touches thoughts. It has a sense it smells out ideas. You know what I mean? The brain imagines, constructs. It is a sensory organ like all the others. It's like an antenna that well, in a sense, it doesn't just, like I said, ideas don't reside in your brain. You know what I mean? Einstein wasn't born with the theory of relativity lodged somewhere in his brain that he went and dug it out. The theory of relativity is out there in the world somewhere, and he discovered it using his brain. His brain picked up on it. It picked up on all these ideas, and when he got enough of the right ideas in his brain, it was able to formulate and see this other idea, which existed the whole time. There's nothing new under the sun. So, but without the body, without the organs of sensation, the soul doesn't come. I never see disembodied. Like, if a soul is disembodied from the body, it's like a rock. In my mind, not entirely like a rock. Well, like Jesus said, the rock. If these were to keep silence, the very rocks would cry out. And rocks can cry out. Stones can speak. Not the way humans do. You know what I mean? Stones can speak. But the thing is, the soul without a body is like Santa Claus. Santa Claus has a soul. No body, no spirit. Well, his spirit, you could say, lives in all of us, right? In fact, you would say something like that, wouldn't you? Well, Santa Claus may not be... It's not that he isn't real. He's real, all right. There's a guy. We all know what he looks like, right? If I tell you Santa Claus, you know what he looks like? You know all kinds of facts about him, where he lives, what he cares about, what he does. He's got a whole personality, a soul. But he has no sensation for himself. He doesn't feel the world. He doesn't know the world any more than George Washington does. George Washington is another soul and a spirit, right? The spirit that said 2 terms is enough for any man. Some people adopt that kind of, you know what I mean? And so there are ways in which the spirits of men's lives continue in this world. There's ways in which their souls are known to us. but they have no use of their souls without a body. And you need a spiritual body. That's why, when you die, when you take the traditional view of death, I ask, okay, when you die, what body are you in then? Because you are in some sort of body. And it would have to be the spiritual body. Now, your old body hasn't been raised yet. So how you got into a spiritual body without that one being raised, because it's supposed to be raised in power, and that is the resurrection. That is the putting on of the new body. The idea that you're going to just sort of cheat, in a sense, is, in my view, okay? It's kind of cheating. I'm not going to wait for the resurrection. I'm just going to put on my new body right now. Well, you don't have that power. Because in that case, the resurrection, if when you die, you go to heaven or hell and experience things, you're experiencing through some sort of body. You have eyes that see things in the outside world, the world of heaven. You are taking in stuff in that spiritual body. If that's the case, when you die, you just immediately have a spiritual body. The resurrection is almost like an after. What's the point of the resurrection? It's just to prove what is already going on. That's how Arnold Murray taught it. The resurrection of Jesus was just a way of proving that he did rise because we took the body away. But the fact is, according to these, and according to, if you take the traditional view to the extreme, if you continue with the traditional view and just follow it to its logical conclusion without stopping and saying, wait a second, we cannot deny the resurrection because of 1 Corinthians 15. If you don't, and give them credit, not all traditionalists, because a lot of lay people don't, because they don't think about these things. They don't think about, like, well, how do we deal with the resurrection? But the way the teachers have dealt with it is they say, like, well, you come back for your body for some reason. Even though the body you sow is not the body that shall be. There's no body to come back for. Meaning, you don't want that carnal body. That body is bare grain sown in the earth that's going to spring forth a different body, a spiritual body, a celestial body, a heavenly body, a spiritual body. That's what's going to come out of the ground. Not the old flesh, though they're intimately connected. That's why that's why it comes out of the ground, because it's you again. It's you again. But in a new body. If you just, when you die, just what happens by nature, you just instantly go to heaven, then you're in a body, and that is the resurrection. What happens when you die, that is the resurrection. It's just not the resurrection of the body. It's just you are receiving every benefit of the resurrection without the outward formality of having your body raised. You get to go to heaven. You get all the pastries you can eat. You get if you're a Muslim, you get the virgins. If you're a whatever. But I don't know. But I would say the Christians, they get their pastries. The Muslims, they get their virgins. I think we're not selling this, guys. We're not selling it. We're not selling it properly. You don't get any of that garbage. Jesus taught that in heaven they neither marry nor are given in marriage. And heaven is a place where righteousness dwells. You're not going to gorge yourself on pastries or any other indulgence. Heaven is not a place of self-indulgence. There are pleasures forevermore with the Lord, but it is not what you think. It's not the carnal pleasures of overindulgence. Why is it sinful here to indulge in just stuffing? Is it just for pragmatic reasons because you'll get fat? Well, I don't think. No, that's not it. It's that there's something fundamental about if you're going to enter into God's kingdom, He can't have a bunch of self-serving. He's going to share His power with you, and all you do is care about your own pleasure and serve yourself. You know what I mean? God could have just created whatever. What are you going to do when you receive these things? Just seek pleasure? Your own pleasure? At some point, your own pleasure comes at the expense of others. At some point, you're so, well, I'll just keep it. No, it's like, no. There's some point in which pleasure seeking is actually soul destroying. The man who seeks only pleasure and nothing productive is an empty person whose soul is falling apart. They have not. You lose yourself in entertainments, amusements. The word amusements, a friend of mine told me, and I don't know why I didn't see it. Amuse, without musing, without meditation, is what it means. An unmeditative state. It means, like just let's give ourselves over to amusements. Let's not think deeply. Let's just indulge. And a life given over to amusement is an empty life. Sometimes it feels good to just relax and disengage and be amused. I'm not throwing that all into the dumpster. But a life that is characterized by nothing but amusement and pleasure is an empty life and a miserable life. When we think of that cliche person who's living in their mother's basement, playing video games all the time, is that a happy image for that person? Does people think that person, they're happy and fulfilled in life? Usually it's like they're kind of embarrassed about their life. But it's their life, whatever. They do what they do. They want to do it because they're addicted to pleasure. Okay. Man was made a living soul. The last man, Adam, referring to Christ, which he will say, was made a quickening spirit. But it also refers to our new creation. Dust thou art, and to dust thou shalt return. Adam was created of the dust of the earth. Also, every resurrected man is created out of the dust of the earth, meaning that you come from the same body. The body that is put in the ground is like a seed, and from wherever that seed is planted shall sprout a new body. You're going to stand up from the place you die, or wherever your body happens to be located, or the average location of your body. The average location is, if you fall into the sea and you're devoured by the fishes, well, it says the sea gave up the dead which were in it. You come out of the sea. Where? Well, whatever the average location is. Take where all the particles have been scattered. Just take the average. I don't know the exact formula. I'm just saying it's like that's a solution, an easy solution. Just take all the locations of the particles in space, and then average them, and then that'll be the central hub from which you reemerge. At least that's an answer, is it not? And I think it's a pretty good one, actually. As far as it sounds very technically, and quite possibly true. So, Jesus was made alive from the dead. The resurrection is not just a natural process of death. When you die, you do not just get a default resurrection and then you go to heaven or hell. No, when you die, your spirit returns to God who gave it. Because the spirit ultimately belongs to God. It's not entirely personal to you. It's like your clothes. My clothes get stretched sometimes. If I'm overweight, it might get stretched to fit me. My pants fit me, whatever. They might smell like you. They got your skin cells on them. They're your clothes. They fit you while you're wearing them, certainly. They're definitely you, right? But if you take them off and send them to Goodwill, they're still just clothes. And the spirit is a lot like that. Your spirit is an important part of what makes you you. It makes you alive. But I believe, and this is, you can disagree on this. It's certainly, you can disagree with everything. Please, feel free. I expect everyone to agree with me. But the spirit seems to be a little less personal. And, take that with a grain of salt. But certainly, the fact that when people die, they give up the ghost. The spirit goes to God. That's consistently through Scripture. When you die, your spirit goes to God. And there are other scriptures which say also that the dead are in their graves. So as I said, that when you're separated from the spirit of life, you're dead. The presumption a lot of people have is that we are immortal by an innate quality. But you gotta, this passage says, this mortal must put on immortality. And that doesn't happen by nature just when you die. That's not putting on immortality. That's revealing immortality. Like if you died and it's like your body dies and you're just like, whoa, look it. I'm actually immortal. I can't die. I'm still conscious. I'm still alive. Hello? Nobody can. Hello? Oh, oh. You know, like those after death movies, you know, where people die and they're like I'm immortal actually. I'm somewhere. I'm in another world now. I've crossed over into a different dimension. And, you know, and they think that's how it is. I don't think that's how it is at all. I think what it is it goes black, and then a split second later, there's the resurrection, and you're at the end of time. Well, if you're in the in the first resurrection, you're actually at the end of this world. If you're at the but you're at the judgment of God, or at the resurrection of the righteous, which is not the judgment, it's not condemnation. You don't enter into either thing. It is the judgment of life. So, but I mean, the next thing you know, it's just resurrection time. Okay, so you do not step out into immortality. What it is the mortal puts on immortality. And from your experience, actually, you may not experience it much different. But it is not that people die and then they're wandering around looking for heaven or hell, or that you die. And then it's sort of like every death is like a little rapture, isn't it? Every death is a miniature rapture. You know, because like they die and you don't see it, but secretly they've been taken to heaven. Secretly, they've been spirited away. When the spirit leaves the body dies, and the soul dies with it, in my opinion. And what about the Lord Jesus? Could his soul die? Well, I don't know. That's what they call it, sleep. His body died, didn't it? And that person, Jesus, was dead for that time period. I'm not saying he ceased to exist, God forbid. That's not what it means. It means the spirit of life left him. And was Jesus unconscious? Well, it says he... It says he went and preached his spirits in prison, but I'm not clear that was while he was in 3 days in... Yeah, no, I'm not clear about that at all. In fact, I don't believe that. But that's another subject for another time, because I'd like to take in all those scriptures if I was going to explore that. When Jesus was in the grave, was he at all... I don't think he was... I guess my instinct is to say he wasn't conscious. Now, maybe there's a scripture that'll take that away from me. So, well, he preached the spirits in prison. That's after his resurrection, I believe. So, I don't know. I don't want to get too deep in that, because like my brain is a little bit fuzzy on those scriptures. It's been a little bit of time since I've been in those. So I know there's several things said about that. A lot of times people make the mistake of assuming they understand what it says, and like there's the spirits in prison, and then there's to those who were a long time waiting while the Ark of Noah was preparing. When Jesus was raised from the dead, one of the first things he said to the women was, "Hey, I am not yet ascended to my Father." So the idea that he went to heaven is kind of out. He had not yet ascended. Say, well, he hadn't ascended after the resurrection. Yeah, I guess. So what he's saying, he died and then he went to heaven, hung out for a couple days. You know what I mean? Laughing, having a good time. Then went back for his body, and then said to the women after he got to his body, "I'm not yet ascended to my Father." Get out of here. I don't know. I think that's such a weird thing to do. Like trying to put myself in Jesus' shoes. As far as just seeing he dies. Oh, that was rough. And then immediately everything's better. The moment he gives up the ghost. No wonder he yielded up the spirit a little early on the cross, right? He was already dead. They thought maybe he should still be alive, but he died fast. I mean, with the beating he'd received. I'm not saying nothing disparaging about the Lord, just about the idea, okay, it was easy to get off. Now I'm off the cross, things are a lot better. Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. Doesn't sound like, to the idea of, here's another thing. When Jesus died, he said, I commend my spirit. That sounds like I'm giving you something for safekeeping. Not like, Father, I abandon the body. You know what I mean? Jesus gave up the ghost. That's the way they speak of it. They don't say, and Jesus gave up the body. But that's how people believe. That's what we think today. Not me, but that's what the general way of thinking. And when you try to talk about it, it's so counterintuitive because we've been so conditioned to think about it in one way. And I think about it so much the other way that I forget that for other people it's probably like very odd listening to me talk about it. I apologize. I don't want to do this on purpose. I don't do this just to be contrary. It comes from years of being confronted with the difficulties and saying at some point, like, you know what? This other way makes a lot more sense to me. So forgive me if you cannot receive it. So he was made a living spirit. First man was made a living soul. Quickening means life-giving spirit. I believe it means life-giving. That's what I was always told. Let's see if they were lying to me. Quickening. Yeah. See, living soul is Zoa. And I'm just, I'm using, I like to do this. I know a lot of people have seen this before, and I'm not trying to, it's nothing that marvelous to see, but it's good to know, to remind you. You can use things like Bible Hub, and for some reason I think that seems to be fitting everything, I guess. Okay, so here it says living soul. When I highlight that, you can't see it, but a little window pops up that says Zao 2198 to live. And then when it says quickening, which also is a similar word, zuopoyo. I'm going to say that's kind of close. I really tried to read it. And by read it, I mean the pronunciation key, not just the... It looks to me, if I was just looking at that word, it looks like zupoyo. In fact, maybe zupoyo. No, zupoyo, not eo. Okay, it looks like eo to me. It means that word zupoyo means to make alive, as opposed to a living spirit. He was made living. He had that state. But the second man, Adam, was made a life-giving spirit. Which is, as I read that, I'm sort of like, that whole contrast is kind of weird now as I'm thinking about it. I'm like, okay, he was made a living soul. Made a life-giving spirit. Well, I guess he must be referring to the fact that when Adam came to life, he became a living soul. He came from nothing and became something, a person. That's not what throws me off is that he doesn't refer to his body. He doesn't refer to Adam's body. The first man, Adam, was made of the dust of the ground. The second man, Adam, was made of the spirit. That would be what I would want Paul to say there as far as just for continuity. But he doesn't say that. He says something a little different. He says what he says. A living soul, and Adam was made the last man, Adam, was made a quickening spirit. And of course, that's because in his resurrection, he was raised in a spiritual body. But I suppose you could also say, Adam's body was combined with the breath of life to make a living soul. That was the end result. The Lord Jesus already had a living soul, had a soul, right? And so what is the resurrection of the last man, Jesus? What is his resurrection? Because when it refers to him as Adam, the last man, he means the man, the first begotten from the dead, the man born of the earth, the man whose body came out of the tomb. You know what I mean? That's when he refers, that's the second Adam, the man who rose from the dead. And that is our second form also. Well, when Christ was raised, there wasn't a new soul being created, but a new body. So the first man was created as a new soul out of dust and the Spirit of God, and the Spirit of life from God. Not the Holy Spirit, the person of the Godhead, of the Trinity, as it's known, but rather just living spirit. The last man, Adam, is made a quickening spirit, life-giving spirit. What is new about him? The Spirit of life from God has entered into him again, and his soul is alive again. But now his body is, instead of a carnal body, it is a body of the substance of the Spirit, which is life-giving. That's how I'm going to look at that. Howbeit that is not first which is spiritual, but that which is natural. Afterward that is which is spiritual. I like the amount of detail I've given on these verses, because these are really, really, really jam-packed verses with, there's so much there. That which is first is not which is spiritual, but that which is natural, after that which is spiritual. And I discussed this. We don't come from somewhere else and then inhabit bodies. When our bodies come into being, we come into being. We are first natural, then spiritual. It's not the other way around. We don't start off spiritual and then go into the body, and then the body dies and the spiritual just escapes. Because that's how some people think that God sends you. People think that it's like God, the Lord sent me an angel. And my little baby. And some people more literally than others. Some people just think it's a gift from God, the pregnancy and all that. But they understand that the child is made in the womb, as the scriptures say. There's plenty of Psalms and stuff to say, that I was sown, I was knit together in the womb. That's where we come to be, is in the womb. Before I was in the womb, God knew me. Because the womb is the earliest point at which you could talk about my existence. But God knew me as far as when I was in the womb, God could know me because I existed. But God, in his infinite knowledge, knows me even before then, before I exist. That's what that means. Before you were in the womb, I knew you. Before you came into being, I knew you. Because in a sense, you do exist prior to your birth. Because in the purposes of God, you are part of God's plan. And so you're not alive, you don't have sensation, but you do exist in a sense, in the same sense that all the ideas that ever could be thought already exist. All the songs that could ever be written already exist. They haven't been brought to life, but they certainly exist in potential. We existed in potential, but in more than potential, because God had purposed the world to come forth in the way it did. So at any time from when God decided to bring about the purpose of this world, when my existence became part of that plan, in the purposes of God, I had an existence, but not in any sense that we would consider like pre-existence, like of a conscious existence in heaven, waiting to inhabit a body. I reject all such ideas. First man is of the earth, earthy. And not just living here, he's made of it. We're made of the same substance of the earth, like completely. We feed off the things that grow out of the earth, and our bodies consist of the materials taken from that consumption. Our mothers in the womb feed us of the materials they eat through their bloodstream, through that umbilical cord into the placenta. We are earthly, and Adam, of course, was made directly from the dust of the earth. First man is of the earth, earthy. The second man is the Lord from heaven. No man hath ascended into heaven, except he that came down from heaven, even the Lord Jesus which is in heaven. It's from the Gospel of John. It's an important verse for me because it means that when you die, that no man has ascended into heaven except the Lord Jesus. Well, I mean, nobody has ascended to heaven in victory. That's one way of looking at it, but I look at it as an absolute. That no man, at least as far as that is the rule. Now, other people ascended into heaven like John, but not in resurrection, not in resurrected bodies. Well, that's what we're saying. They haven't gone back for their body yet, but they've ascended into heaven in victory? You know what I mean? I don't think so. Well, they're in Abraham's bosom. Well, that's not an eternal state, and that's not even a true story. It's just that is a parable based on the traditions of the Pharisees. They're the ones who came up with this idea of Abraham's bosom. It's not in the Old Testament. Everything you read in that parable is a reflection of the mythology of the Pharisees. The first man is of the earth, earthly. The second man is the Lord from heaven. As is the earthly, such are they also that are earthly. Earthy. I want to say earthly. Earthy. As is the earthy, such are also that are earthy. And as is the heavenly, such are they also that are heavenly. I mean, you take on the nature. This is what I'm saying. You have the character of yourself as an individual in the resurrection, but you take on the nature, the body. Your body takes on the nature of the heavenly, not the nature of the earthy. We have the nature of the earthy. That's called nature. The natural body, the body that we have by nature, that we have from our conception in our mother's womb, that body which was created starting with one cell. And then when it comes to like things like abortion and stuff, it's like, well, people say, well, how can you say one cell has soul and spirit? Well, it certainly has life. It's alive. We know that. It's living. And I remember Bill Clinton was interesting. I thought it was fascinating because when he defended his belief about abortion, Bill Clinton used a religious justification, which fascinated me. Because here we have, because he was, he was very known for carrying his Bible around and stuff, especially after he got caught having oral sex with the intern. He was seen with his Bible a lot, and what better, where else are you going to go? Because men are a lot less forgiving than God, I'll tell you that. He said that until the baby took its first breath, it had no soul. And therefore, abortion was fine right up till birth, because without breath, there's no soul. And what I would say to that is like, no. See, breath is a euphemism for life. Life is not breath, but it's necessary for life. So just like a lot of other things are necessary for life, so they can be kind of used as euphemisms for life. Like when people say, I need to relieve myself. That's a euphemism for relieving yourself, right? I don't even have to tell you what it means. That is not to say that relieving yourself is that. That is that. The relief that comes is secondary. So life is life, but the breath that comes is secondary. I don't have to breathe to live. I can just hold my breath. Still alive while I was holding my breath. Now I need to go back to breathing. But breath itself is not life. It's not like, well, I'm more alive. Now I'm less alive. It's not like that. So life, we got distracted by the time. Ah, yes. So what I would respond to that is basically that, well, the breath is not life. It is a euphemism for life. It is analogy for life, but it is not life itself. Life itself can exist without breathing. But we breathe as part of our lives. It's the most. If we stop breathing, we stop living because we need oxygen. But that is not life itself. Life requires oxygen. The body needs oxygen to sustain life. But not the breath itself is not life, and it is not soul either. That is a misunderstanding of that passage. When man became alive, he became a soul, a living soul. He had perception. He had sensation. Now, the baby, without the better argument is like the body, without having form, does not provide the life with any sensation. So it's hard to call it a living soul at one cell. And I agree that at one cell, it's not a living soul. But it is the potential for a living soul, which if all things go according to nature and according to things going well, I mean, like we can have a misadventure. I could walk out my door and a meteor could fall out of the sky and strike me on the head and kill me dead right after the study. But, Lord willing, it won't happen. And so also things happen in the womb. The child dies. They exist in potential. Right? They are coming towards life if things go as it ought to. But early in the conception, the person, there's no person. I mean, I believe a person exists, just like I said, a rock exists, but they are not a living person yet. I don't know exactly when they become a living person. At some point in there, they got to become a living person. I don't know where you draw that line. When I guess the first time they sense something, they're a living person. But that doesn't mean I think you should be able to kill them, even though they're not living persons yet. I think the fact that they're a person, now that the person, every sperm and egg represents a potential person. But once they come together, the potential has crossed a certain threshold. Now you have a life that exists that is going to take that potential, is working feverishly to bring that potential into reality. And and not only that, it is of itself, if you continue to feed it, it will become a person without fail if it continues to get fed and sustained. Sperms and eggs, no matter how you sustain them, will never become people, like individually. Like billions of sperm and billions of eggs will not become people until they become a zygote, until they become fertilized. So that to me seems like the most obvious place to draw the line. Otherwise, you're left at sort of murky areas like, well, a heartbeat, heartbeat. I know stopping a beating heart is a very powerful symbolic thing, but it starts much sooner, doesn't it? I mean, we can't deny it. Life begins, though the sperm and the egg are technically living, but it is not a human life until conception. And then it is human. It's certainly fully human. It's one human cell. When I was conceived, it was when I was conceived with a birth control device. You know what I mean? The IUD. In fact, that means my conceived egg was supposed to be destroyed after I was conceived. It just didn't work. I was born with the IUD clenched in my fist. I actually made up that part. Or did I? I forgot if that... No, I think that part's made up. I clenched it in my fist and it came out and I shook it in my mother's face. No, I'm just kidding. That's just a funny thought. I'm sorry to be so goofy. So we take on the characteristics of the earthy as we are in the earth. We take on, so I guess I got on that because I was talking about the characteristics of the earthy, the mother eating things, and it made me think of the womb. There we go. You can't get too close to the womb without talking about abortion, I guess. And as we have borne the image of the earthy, we shall also bear the image of the heavenly. The body that is the heavenly body has the characteristics of heaven. And as we have borne the image of the earthy, in the earth we have an earthy image in our body. We have borne this image. We shall also bear the image of the heavenly. The heavenly has a slightly different image, doesn't it? The earthly body is somewhat bestial, right? We're kind of like beasts, right? We share so much in common with them. We have more in common with beasts than we do with God. We're made in his image, but we really have more in common with beasts as far as the natural man. The new man, which is created in Christ Jesus unto good works and unto the resurrection, begins to draw near God. But according to our nature, we are of the earth, earthy. But in the resurrection, we will be of the heavens, heavenly. And we'll take on the nature of the heavenly. We will bear the image of the heavenly. That's what you see on the Mount of Transfiguration. That's the future. That's what the heavenly image is. And when the angel, he appeared in great shining white garments. His face shone like the sun. It's the image of the earthly bodies. Of the heavenly bodies. As you've seen heavenly bodies, that is the image we shall bear. As we have borne the image of the earthly, of Adam, we have the image of Adam. We are like Adam, flesh and blood. But it has its own kind of flesh, its own kind of blood. I don't know. He says there's one kind of flesh of beasts, one kind of flesh of birds. There are bodies terrestrial and bodies celestial. And then verse 50. I think we're going to pick up with verse 50 tomorrow. Sure, we're at the end here. So pick it up with verse 50 tomorrow. Thanks for joining me in this study. Look forward to studying with you again, like we said, tomorrow. All right. And, okay, ready to go. There we go.
But in those days, after that affliction, the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars of heaven shall fall, and the powers that are in heaven shall be shaken. And then they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. And then shall he send his angels, and shall gather together his chosen from the four winds, from the uttermost part of earth to the uttermost part of heaven.